Congressman, one of the things that you talked about tonight was the REINS Act, I believe it was.
That's right.
Can you explain what that is in case our viewers, like myself, aren't all that familiar with it?
Sure. The REINS Act addresses this problem where our federal government continues to issue rules from the Environmental Protection Agency to the agency that administers Obamacare, all these different agencies of the federal government. They're issuing major rules that impact our lives and adversely impact our economy and our wages without Congress ever voting on these rules. And so the REINS Act would require every major regulation that is developed in Washington to come before Congress for an up or down vote before it can actually become law. And so most of the Republican presidential candidates are running in favor of the REINS Act. It's part of the Republican national platform right now. And I've introduced it for 2 successive Congresses. We've gotten it passed out of the House of Representatives. And if I go to the U.S. Senate, or in the trust in support of Hoosiers, I'll work to make sure we put it on a Republican president's desk and get it signed into law.
Now, how is Congress going to have the time to look at all of these regulations?
You know, there are only a couple of hundred regulations, major regulations that are typically produced each year. So I think Congress has plenty of time between all the campaigning members of Congress do and all the speeches they deliver and all the extraneous activities that really don't add a whole lot of value to Americans' lives. We have plenty of time, ourselves and our staff, to review these regulations and to make judgments about their merits.
Okay. Another issue that seemed to draw the attention of the crowd tonight at the Clay County Republican Club was Social Security and the things associated with that. Speak, if you would, and correct me if I misunderstood you, but you lumped Social Security in with 3/4 of the budget, and you said that you would be asking for cuts. You know, we've all heard that. That's not what you mean?
Well, that's not. There's 2/3 of the budget, roughly right now, that's on autopilot.
And in 10 years, 3/4.
And it's programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the interest we pay on our debt. These programs are on autopilot. Congress doesn't vote on them annually. And in 10 years, our national balance sheet is only going to get worse. We're going to grow more debt. And so then these programs that are on autopilot will be 3/4 of our budget. Okay. And all I'm saying is that programs like Social Security, which is headed towards bankruptcy, as is Medicare, need to be made solvent. That shouldn't even be controversial.
How would you do that?
Well, in the case of Medicare, we've gotten very specific in our Republican budgets that I worked on with Paul Ryan and others. We would take the Medicare Part D prescription drug model, which allows individual consumers to choose which prescription drug plan works best for them. These different plans will compete against one another for the consumer's business. We take that model, which is very popular and has come in at half of projected costs. We apply that model to the entire Medicare program. And I'm open to other ideas. Democrats have not produced, as a party, any other ideas to make sure that Medicare stays solvent. And so I guess my overriding message here is we need to send people to Washington who are committed to actually solving problems, doing tough things, rather than just giving speeches and casting votes.
One of the things that came to mind when you were talking was we've all heard that Social Security is the third rail. If you're running for office, you don't want to touch it. So how can you solve the Social Security issue without offending many of the senior citizens, if not all the senior citizens who are on Social Security?
You can exempt people who are approaching retirement or currently in retirement from changes to their Social Security benefits. And in recent years, that number has been, if you're age 55 or older, there'd be no changes whatsoever to your benefits. Frankly, I talk to people my age and younger. They're not expecting much Social Security, if any. I'm expecting none for my children if we don't act pretty quickly, right? So there's an urgency to act, again, to make difficult decisions, but we can do so in a way that does not adversely impact those who approach retirement or are in retirement, because they paid in, and they don't have time to save more. and many aren't in a position to work longer, right? So I've got real moral concerns with those who wouldn't provide enough time to make adjustments. Yeah.
One of the questions that you were asked involved health insurance, not health insurance, but you were talking about growing the economy. What ideas do you have to grow the economy? I think we all understand that if the economy grows, truly grows, not inflation, but just
That's right.
real growth in the economy, it's going to benefit all of us. What ideas do you have to do that?
Well, let's open up foreign markets to our food, to our fiber, to our manufactured goods, to our services. I've played a role in that on the committee I serve in. 95% of the world's consumers lie outside of the United States. And other countries are forging agreements that allow them access to those markets. We need access to those markets as well. But we've got to make sure that these agreements are fair before we ever sign on to them. The next thing we need to do is simplify this mind-numbing tax code. It shouldn't take the average family 14 hours on average to comply with the tax code. And if we do that, if we simplify the code and start making our spending decisions and our investment decisions and our saving decisions based on what the individual wants, whether you're a consumer or just saving for your kids' college education or so forth, if we start making decisions based on individual needs as opposed to clever things in the tax code, then the economy will grow faster. The other thing we need to do, this goes back to the RAINS Act, is reduce the regulatory burden, especially on our smaller businesses. If you're a large business, you can probably establish a compliance department. You'll have a host of different attorneys that will make sure that you can comply with the regulatory burden. And oh, by the way, your smaller, more nimble competitors, they may go out of business, or you may acquire them because they can't establish these separate departments.
Sure.
So we're really benefiting the big businesses when we know that jobs are created by small businesses. And so we also need to reform our regulatory system. So those are among the things I would do. And of course, all the while we have to avoid a debt crisis, which means getting our budget balanced so that there's not an incentive by our Federal Reserve to keep printing dollars, debasing our currency, and that certainly doesn't help economic growth either.
Okay, and I just had two other questions. The first one is there something that you really want to see in this video or in the news story that I haven't asked you about tonight that maybe you mentioned and I haven't asked you about?
Well, one thing is my background, which plays into an increasingly important role in our politics, which is national security. It's always important to our government, but our politics is starting to emphasize the importance of safety and security right now. And I think that is much needed. I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I'm a Marine Corps intelligence officer trained in anti-terrorism force protection. I understand that the U.S. has to stay engaged in the world, not just economically and diplomatically, but also militarily. Otherwise, these small fires become unmanageable situations, and you end up doing what this Obama administration has done, which is be reactive to things that are going on in the world. We need forward-looking strategies to address rising threats, and you cannot do that by reacting day to day to different events. And so the most fundamental responsibility of federal legislators, U.S. senators or U.S. House members, and of the President of the United States is to keep the American people safe and secure. It's one I take very seriously, and one I believe I'm equipped to add some value in based on my military background.
Very good. The last question I have, as we record this, Donald Trump is the front runner, but we all know that there's a long time till the election and there's a lot of things can change. Who do you want to see in the White House if you're sitting in the Senate seat?
You know, I'm still watching, like so many Republicans, I'm still watching the debates that are playing out. I'm still learning about different candidates' ideas. What I do want is someone that I sense has actual solutions to problems, right? Doesn't just define the problem. but someone who's prepared to go out there to propose solutions and persuade others of the merits of them, and then that's how government works, and then get things done. What the American people are most frustrated about right now, and conservatives in particular, is the seeming inability of Washington to get important things done right now.
Sure.
And I have gotten things done, passing regulatory reform bills out of the House, working with Mitch Daniels on a higher ed financing bill that involves no government backstop or spending, all manner of different things. And that's really my objective here, and I think that should be the objective of the next president, effective conservative leadership, not just rhetorical.
So who do you like at 3 days before Christmas in 2015?
I'm running my campaign, so I'm trying to persuade people that I would be not just a suitable, but a very effective conservative senator for the state of Indiana, and so that will continue to be my focus. Jobs in the economy, safety and security, and actually representing